It's been a while since I've been this hyped for a new Sonic game releasing. After the first Sonic movie released, I got somewhat back into the series, and when Frontiers was being shown off, I decided to keep an eye on it. While a certain preview made me more cautiously optimistic than excited, once the game was released, I had a blast playing it and thought it was a great step forward for the series. So after the DLC for Frontiers wrapped up and Sega first revealed Sonic X Shadow Generations, I again was cautiously optimistic. I mean, Sonic Generations is my second favorite Sonic game of all time, and Shadow is my favorite character, so it's already starting off on the right foot. Just gotta hope they stick the landing. And man, Sega really stepped up the marketing for this game. Every trailer showed off something cool, like which stages were returning, the new power Shadow can wield, and the tease of the return of Maria and Gerald Robotnik. Soon enough, I was extremely excited to play the game. So much so, I may have bought the game 4 times. I have a very good explanation for this. PS5 Digital Deluxe Edition to play the game as early as possible for content, Switch Digital so I can take it on the go early. Only problem with that is I didn't know that the Switch didn't have the 3-day early perk, which was included for the other versions. Come on Sega, what the hell? A Switch physical version, cause I like physical copies, and finally the PS5 Limited Run Collector's Edition, including an awesome Sonic Shadow Dreamcast statue, art book, soundtrack, little chows, and a few extra goodies. Too bad it will take a while to get here. But regardless, once midnight hit on release night, I started playing Shadow Generations and completed everything the game had to offer. And it was the most fun I had with a Sonic game in a long time. Plus, bundling it with Sonic Generations honestly might put this as my favorite Sonic game of all time. Before going into the game itself, I just gotta say I love how Sonic Team recaps Shadow's history. While SA2 is easy to play via online stores, his standalone game hasn't been as fortunate, making it difficult for newer fans to experience an important part of Shadow's story. I do recommend at least trying both games as they're both fun to play. One is obviously more fun than the other, but regardless, play both if you can. If you can, however, the Shadow story video does a serviceable job detailing all the key points to know prior to starting the game. Big fan of the artwork here. The one pic of Shadow and Maria looking at the stars together would have to be my favorite. But if we want to talk about something even better, I have to bring up the Dark Beginnings prologue, giving us some great action with Shadow and Team Dark, along with calmer moments showing the relationship between Shadow and Maria. Seeing Shadow's character go in depth after years of being in the background was nice to see as someone who grew up with those first few games of his. While it was only 14 minutes long, this prologue was so entertaining, I would love to see Sega just make a full-fledged series like this. Now, when it comes to the story within the game itself, it just keeps the ball rolling with an awesome adventure that shows just why so many people adore this character. Taking place at the same time as Sonic Generation, Shadow goes off to investigate an anomaly aboard the Ark, which turns out to be a revived Black Doom. After the Time Eater sends everyone to White Space, Shadow is sent to his own little area where he sets off to defeat Black Doom once and for all, while also reuniting with Maria and Gerald Robotnik due to the effects of the Time Eater. And while it can be seen as a blessing to reunite with the people who are basically your family, Maria's fate and Gerald's plot to use Shadow for revenge makes him feel a bit more conflicted with the current predicament. But man, seeing Maria and Gerald again, every cutscene, conversation, even reading through Gerald's journal, I was enjoying every moment of it. Plus, having Black Doom serve as the main antagonist was such a great choice. While serving a large role in Shadow's backstory, it's such a nice callback to Shadow's standalone game, which felt like Sega just wanted to keep in the past. 2005 was a different time. Darkness, guns, angst, language, dams. While the story was a fun ride through, like many things in the game, the one negative I have is regarding the length. Roughly taking around the same amount of time to finish as Sonic's campaign, which wasn't that long of a game to begin with either. We do get solid moments, like Gerald giving his side of the story to past events, Shadow and Maria together give us some of the best moments in the whole game, and Black Doom throughout the story serves as a good threat to Shadow, messing with him both physically and mentally. While some aspects of the story could have been explored more, sadly there's just not enough time to do it. You'll enjoy everything the story has to offer, it's just that I enjoyed it so much, I simply wanted more. And with how amazing the gameplay is here, you can't really blame me. Taking the best aspects from both Sonic Generations and Sonic Frontiers, while also adding new elements to make Shadow's Adventures stand on its own. When the game was first shown off, I was skeptical on how the levels would play out, as it's been a while since Sonic Generations released, and later games changed things up with its gimmicks, mechanics, and level design. So I was worried if Shadow Generations could match the level of quality found in the original generations, considering they're being bundled together. And while Shadow does play differently compared to both Sonics, these levels might be some of the best the series has to offer. Following the same setup as base generations, all the levels are taken from previous Sonic games, now utilizing the boost formula modern Sonic has been using ever since Rush and Unleashed. You got locations like the Ark, Kingdom Valley, and for some reason Chaos Island. Doesn't make the most sense since Shadow was never there, but hey, it's an awesome stage, so can't complain. Every zone has their own quirks to make them stand apart, like Rail Canyon having bots that will destroy paths if you don't get ahead of them, or Kingdom Valley having ropes you can bounce on to gain additional height. Plus, every stage has multiple branching paths that reward you for being quick on your feet and can properly utilize Shadow's new powers. Throughout the story, Shadow obtains new Doom powers that will improve his combat and traversal in stages. And with so many abilities to use, you'll never have a moment where you can just complete a stage by just holding down the boost button. Gaining a new power and seeing what paths open up in stages is a lot of fun, like using Doom Spears against a foe, followed up with a Doom Blast to break down a wall, or surfing on water and using Chaos Control to attack a fleeing enemy. If you see something in the distance and it looks like a possible new route, jump back in and see where it'll take you. While most Doom powers are easy to understand, the only one that takes a bit to figure out is Doom Morph. The tutorial didn't do the best job explaining how to use it, but once you do figure it out, the potentials for skips and traversal open up greatly. Of course, another useful power is Chaos Control, allowing you to freeze time as well as revealing shortcuts in stages. While the shortcuts are cool, stopping the timer is awesome since now if players can optimize when to use it and how to charge it best, getting faster times for the leaderboards become more challenging and rewarding. Not to mention the skips and text players have already discovered, whether you're running through casually or aiming for the fastest time, each stage is simply a blast to play through. Also, I love how each act is split between 3D and 2D. Rather than having a stage transition between perspectives like how modern Sonic did in the past, the first act is entirely 3D, while Act 2 is 2D. So now each act has their own playstyle, and while I do prefer the 3D levels over the 2D ones, the 2D acts here are very fun to boost through. Kingdom Valley would have to be my favorite zone, as both acts are a blast to run through, and each having clever uses for Shadow's powers. The only issue I had originally with the 2D stages was the camera could feel a little too close at times and I would slip up because of it. But after running through stages again, I would correct it and the issue would resolve itself. But the camera work in the 2D stages is very dynamic, changing its angles to either assist with oncoming obstacles or for a cool set piece. I love how in Sonic Generations, the camera for classic Sonic was never fixed in one place. It moved around and it added additional perspective to these 2D acts. This is something I noticed was lacking in the classic levels in Forces, for example. Also, while not a major complaint, the ranking system for acts is way too forgiving. You can fumble multiple times and yet still get an S rank. Only the last zone actually gave me trouble, and that was just because I wasn't using the Doom powers. Again, not the worst thing in the world, I just feel like if S ranks were harder to get, they would feel more rewarding. After completing stages and reaching the boss gate, like base generations, you'll need to complete challenges to obtain the keys. And unlike base gens where there were so many challenges to choose from, all ranging in quality, the few here are all fun to play through, providing quick bite-sized challenges that don't overstay their welcome. And once you do get the keys, the boss fights are an amazing spectacle, fighting classic foes like the Bio Lizard, Metal Overlord, and my personal favorite, Mephiles. Ignoring the faults found in Sonic 06, I did enjoy the Shadow campaign just because of the dynamic he had with Mephiles. So seeing him return as a boss got me really excited. And like the returning stages, with certain aspects calling back to their original games, the Doom powers help change things up. Using Doom Surf to throw debris back at metal, or using Morph to easily traverse the purple ooze Mephiles covers the field with. Not to mention knowing certain tricks can help defeat them even faster. Besides Mephiles, my second favorite boss fight would have to go to the final boss. I won't show or say why since the game is still fairly new and nothing was shown in the trailers, but it's an amazing finale to the adventure, and the music just adds so much more for older fans of the series. But like the story, the short length also hurts the stage count, as rather than having 9 zones with 2 acts, we only get 6. Also, I've seen some people complain about how Black Doom constantly sends you to a radical highway area in some acts, but honestly, I didn't find this to be much of an issue. These segments are all different, and the cinematic moments during the transitions are just cool to watch. But I do understand people's complaints when we finally, for example, get a good Sunset Heights level, only for you to be taken out of it, and when you escape, the level is over. Another downer is the lack of Shadow 05 stages, which I felt like should have been represented more for this title, but since we do have Black Doom here, plus additional music to play in stages, it's not like it was completely ignored. But even with the fewer zones compared to Sonic Generations, the other major piece of Shadow Generations is the new open zone, similar to the ones found in Sonic Frontiers, which definitely helps remedy the smaller zone count. Rather than Whitespace being this 2D level select screen, we now have this big playground where Shadow can jump, boost, and utilize his Doom powers to find collectibles, along with completing challenges spread all across the map. I really like the open zones in Frontiers. The freedom to run around and do whatever you want in between stages was a lot of fun, so having a new zone here is a big plus. And slowly getting new Doom powers as the story progresses provides a good flow of completing acts, roaming white space, fighting a boss, and repeat until the credits roll. Just make sure to grab the tokens within stages to open up the multiple chests that will reward you with either concept art, music, and lore. The concept art and lore is cool, but having new music to play within stages is just something I want all Sonic games to include. Another collectible that I highly recommend grabbing are the pages of Gerald Robotnik's journal, providing so much detail of events prior to Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow the Hedgehog, even Sonic Battles for the Game Boy Advance. You'll get a lot out of this journal if you decide to sit down and read through the whole thing, not to mention some cool photos and drawings included within. Once you earned a collectible, you're free to view it in the collection room, plus rewatch cutscenes and see Shadow's iconic motorcycle. I wish we could have used it in white space. Maybe next time. The only major criticism I have regarding white space is the map, as you can only zoom in where you currently are and can't freely move around to search for a particular point, which can be especially annoying when it comes to finding the chest. If you see a chest and you know you don't have the right token, the map won't mark it unless you go up to it and get the message saying you don't have the token, which makes finding the last few really annoying because you just have to remember which ones you went back to and opened. Also, the machine parts which you collect for Orbot and Cubot, that just isn't shown on the map at all, making finding the last one out of 80 so tedious. But outside of finding the last few remaining collectibles, the open zone is great, and having these additional challenges to complete gives you just another thing to do besides running to the next zone. Another thing I have to compliment the game on is the presentation. The game looks great when you're boosting around and during the many cutscenes throughout the story. The PS5 comes with a choice between a visuals and a performance mode, so you're free to pick what gets priority. Good to know beforehand because I didn't until the end of the game and realized I was playing the entire game on the image quality mode at 30 frames per second. Yeah, I wish I knew that beforehand. The load times here are extremely quick. You'll be in a stage and back in white space in seconds. The Switch version obviously isn't as lucky compared to the next gen versions. You don't get any options for visuals and it sticks around 30 frames per second with no significant dips from what I could see. Load times are, from what I could tell, range about 7 to 9 seconds, which is a big jump compared to PS5, but not something that bothered me. Honestly, I was expecting longer load times, so this was surprising to see. Now, the one thing I was worried about was Poppin', considering the amount we saw in Frontiers. But luckily, there wasn't any major Poppin' within White Space, possibly due to the space being very small. But yeah, both versions seem to be handling the Poppin' really well. Controls here feel good. It does take some time to get adjusted with the physics and the differences when compared to base generations. Shadow has a double jump and his air boost doesn't travel as far. And while it does take some time to get adjusted to how Shadow moves at lower speeds, you'll get the hang of it eventually. Now, music isn't something I really need to go too much in detail, because a majority of the time, Sonic games always nail their soundtracks. And here we get some new tracks, old tracks, and remixes all throughout the experience. And voice acting was just as solid, with Kirk Thornton doing his best performance as Shadow in his entire run as the character, showing there's more to this Black Hedgehog behind all the cold expressions. Stephanie Sheh also did an amazing job as Maria, playing the kind, hopeful girl that just wants the best for everyone, and it shows why she left such a large mark in Shadow's life. While the main story doesn't take long to complete, additional challenges and post-game content does extend the playtime a fair bit, taking about 15 hours for me to 100% everything the game had to offer, and afterwards you can just hop over to Sonic Generations to keep the fun going. Plus, if you have the Digital Deluxe Edition, you can play the story with Shadow's early concept design. It looks really silly with his quills down like that, but it's still a cool piece of the character's history, seeing what Shadow started out as before getting the iconic design we have today. In the end, I had an amazing time with Shadow Generations. This short adventure is a jam-packed thrill ride that both longtime and new fans can enjoy. And with a future DLC stage for Sonic Movie 3 featuring Keanu Reeves voicing Shadow, the fun is far from over. For a long time, Sonic Unleashed has held the spot as my favorite Sonic game of all time, but now I feel that Shadow Generations has earned that title, especially if we take into account that Sonic Generations is bundled along with it. Still love Unleashed though. If you haven't played it before, play it, please. I beg you. I want a remake. My hopes for the series' future are very positive. From the movies to Frontiers and Shadow Generations, Sega and Sonic Team are seriously on a roll. They just need to keep the momentum going. Now, I want to hear from you guys. What did you think of Shadow Generations? And would you like me to discuss Sonic Generations Remaster in the future? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. With that said, thanks again guys, and I'll see you again next time. Bye. Okay, one more thing. Can we please ride Shadow's bike in the next game? Come on, it can't just stay in that room.